Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Inclusively. I'm delighted to have an interlocutor on many occasions, Larry Goldberg, join us today to talk about his experience in the accessibility inclusion world and just to broaden the conversation. So, Larry, welcome to Inclusively. Could you introduce yourself to the audience and give us a bit of background as to your history with accessibility and inclusion, and then we'll take the conversation from there.
Absolutely, Chris, and thank you for inviting me. I love talking about this subject, and I came to it maybe a little differently than many, approaching my 40th year in the field. But I come from it as a media and kind of tech nerd, filmmaking, TV programming, computer operations. Didn't know much about the field of disability at all back when I started, but I was hired to run the captioning division of WGBH, Boston's public television station that basically invented captioning on TV. And it's tech. Closed captioning is tech, or as they call it, subtitling in the UK. Inserting data into a TV picture. Perfect. That was just exactly what I was interested in, the data and the TV. And from there, I began to learn so much from the deaf people I would meet. And then eventually we invented audio description for the blind. I got to know the blind community, started working on policy issues, which I find fascinating. I love it. And started the National Center for Accessible Media at WGBH, which is about standards, guidelines, policies, and consulting with corporations. And it was great. Just got to meet so many people. And then after being almost 30 years in that nonprofit, I was approached by Yahoo to join their accessibility team. Not long after, in the US, the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act was passed, known as the CVAA in 2010. And Yahoo needed to comply with a lot of new regulations. And they asked me to come join the team to help them get it all together. So I took a deep dive into the world of Silicon Valley tech. And that was tremendous and interesting and had scale and impact. And I eventually became head of accessibility at Yahoo and had all kinds of side ventures they allowed me to do, which we can talk about. And then about 3 years now, 3 years ago, I left Yahoo to just consult, work with startups, be a troublemaker, make noise, and say things that I might not have been able to say during all that previous career.
Things you couldn't say inside the
Yeah,
comfortable but protected corporate world. Yeah, yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
exactly. So obviously one of the things we look at from the inclusivity side is different disabilities. Is there any, when you think of back to when you first got involved with the deaf community and then with the vision impaired community, any major differences? I mean, in the past, technology has been very specific to different disabilities. What was
Yeah,
your
yeah.
experience around that? Was it very much that very separate from each other? And are we seeing signs of them overlapping, converging at all?
Yeah, it was different for a number of reasons. Closed captioning began in 1980, that whole injecting data into a TV picture. Description of TV shows happened in 1990. That's when that started. That 10-year period was very disruptive in the media industry. We started with those major broadcast networks in 1980. By 1990, cable systems were proliferating, competitors were coming up, and all of a sudden, it was a very different effort to try to get buy-in from the distributors of programming. And that's not even to talk about the difference in the communities and the tech. When it comes down to it, people in the captioning world might not love hearing this, but you're transcribing a sound. I mean, yeah, there's an art to captioning, but you need to reflect exactly what's said. No censorship, no opinions, just the facts. In
Hmm.
description, it's still an art. It is still a beautiful art written by really talented humans. It originally was a very linear, almost analog service. So it's chunks of audio that you have to fit in between the dialogue. So the skills were different, the process was different, the infrastructure for distribution was different. The communities, I think in many ways, the advocates and leaders and grassroots, they were the same. They was like, don't leave us out. What's the problem here? Let's get it done. Don't tell me you don't have the money and don't tell me you don't have the time. Just do it. And I'm so pleased these days and a bit surprised that captioning is as pervasive as it is. It's just everywhere and every platform. And description has grown way beyond I ever imagined. So eventually I won't say we ever reach parity, but pleased to see how much description really is there, mostly on the streaming services. That's the kind of the magical side of it.
And is that do you think its uptake has been because other people use it a lot? So my wife uses captions on all sorts of programs, even those in English with strange regional accents that she doesn't really understand. Like the Scouse accent from Liverpool is quite a particular accent to pick up. So is it because you think the it's used by other people a lot
Totally.
more? Or is
Totally.
it, sorry,
I
and or
said,
is it
yeah.
because the tech is so easy to do? Is it because it's just become so
Oh,
easy to do?
actually, you're right on both points. I often talk about the success of captioning is really based on the mainstream applications and benefits.
Mm.
And like today, I spend a lot of my time in New York City. I ride the subway and everyone's looking at their phones and I peek over their shoulders and everyone's got the text turned on. Everybody. And it makes me so happy to think what we develop for deaf people has now been shared with the world. And I work with a lot of other tech now, including description. And I kind of say, this is the goal. Yes, you've created it for this audience who needs it, requires it, but think about how you can share it more widely and you'll get the traction. And in the early days of description, we used to talk about, oh, it's great if you're in the other room or if you're driving, you can listen to a described movie, but it's not like captioning, which really does have so many extensions into other communities. And yeah, it's kind of easy. That's why automatic speech recognition took off in captioning way before any other technology, because it's turning one form of understandable medium, audio, into another kind, visual text.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so it was easier. And the distribution channels in both the analog and digital media world really enabled the addition of this little data track.
So rounding it out, think since we've got captioning to create the dialogue to share that's a very factual base, which is I like that angle, and then we've got this more artistic interpretation of what's happening posted in between the dialogue. Have you come across much around haptic feedback and
Mm.
give because I saw it at the Olympics in Paris where they had a touchpad showing you where the ball was on a soccer field or a rugby field, and I just think from a blind person point of view, rounding out that whole experience that and we always talk about immersive experiences and the use of headsets and the like in the future, virtual reality and that. Have you come across much of that, or is
Yeah,
that
yeah. Because I really am drawn to the work that some of these startups are doing, I have been exposed to some of these startups in the field of haptics. I'm not blind, so I don't know the ultimate value and which approach really is going to work. But I am really intrigued by how haptics might be able to step in. Um, I'm not sure which one of the solutions is really going to jump out over and above all others. There's one that gives you guidance through haptics on an outboard device, a phone or a
hmm
headset.
Yep.
Can guide you, like I guess a guy ran the New York Marathon just by using this haptics app, and it
Excellent.
helped him keep on the straight and narrow or the
hmm
curves. And it's like, oh, that's cool. I'm not sure where it's gonna flower. I'm very interested in it, and of course, haptics for graphics and education. Absolutely. Not my greatest area of expertise, but I think haptics should have a greater place.
Yeah, I mean, I go to soccer matches here in the Premier League in London, and I get a commentary provided to me as a blind person, and I would love something that just showed me where the ball was on the pitch, just as another element of information feed to me to appreciate the game. I did come across one in the US, by the way, called One Court, which is a basketball app that shows you where the ball is on the basketball court as well. So
And I've heard of another stadium that had put in haptic pads. I believe it was a football, that's American football. And I work with a young startup, haptic.com, I think they're, or haptic.tech. And they're the ones who are really experimenting and embedding their software into other devices. And I don't know where it's going to go. I'm not sure what their
no.
business model is. Uh, and having no risk whatsoever, I'm cheering them on. Great, do it.
And tell me practically, you mentioned in the pre-discussion that you go to theatre a lot, and I mentioned how I involved with audio description and love the theatre and looking at the tech side of how that gets delivered. How's that experience for you?
Yeah. I love the technologies that can enable enjoying live performances. I think it's essential. Live music, live theater, sports. I have a hearing impairment. After working in captioning for so many years, I began losing my hearing, ironically. And so when I go to a show in New York or anywhere, I need to get the headset to understand the dialogue and the speech, the singing. And I run into a lot of bad technology, old technology, FM, IR systems, uncomfortable, often don't work. The last time I went to a lecture just last week, when I asked for assistive listening, the woman at the box office rolled her eyes. It's like, oh, really? It's that annoying to you. Imagine what it's like to me. But then when it works well, like the one now, the Schubert Theater System in New York, Gala Pro, gives you captions,
Hmm.
descriptions, translations. And I used it for a musical recently where there was a lot of rap singing. I couldn't understand it. The captions were elegant, beautifully done. I had to hold
Right.
my phone in my lap, yes. Um, and I'm very enamored of when it's done right, it's great. And you want to talk about this other new technology coming out called Auracast. So why don't you tell us what Auracast
Well,
is?
it's come out of the world of Bluetooth that we all love from AirPod and earbuds and the like, and it's actually the ability to broadcast to very significant numbers using a very simple device, literally a cigarette packet size device that can address the example I was given by Nick Hunn in a recent episode was actually New York, fun enough, at a performance where they mic'd up every instrument in an orchestra, and it was
Oh,
and it was and it was broadcast over Auracast to someone's phone. You all you do is get a QR code, and your phone then logs into that channel. And they said even the guy that wrote the piece of music was astonished at the reaction, because of course you're not hearing that ensemble of music coming at you from the stage. It's coming at you through a headset, through your earbuds or whatever. And obviously, from an audio description point of view, as you said, there's some very clunky technology out there that doesn't always work and get interference and so on. But this sounds like a very cheap, well, relatively cheap but elegant solution. And I believe some smartphones will even have the ability to broadcast this in the near future. So
I am so enamored with this potential.
yeah.
Um, the theaters will not have to hand out headsets. You just bring your phone. Hooray. You can tune into multi-channel Bluetooth. I saw a demo where you're in an airport and there's four different TV screens, and they may or may not have captions on. You can choose which one you want to listen to by multi-channel Bluetooth on your phone.
Mm,
And the infrastructure sounds easier. And I know in the deaf community, they're very excited
yep.
about how much easier this will make things for everybody.
And I did, by the way, I was at the Royal Opera House in London a couple of months ago, and the first half I had these massive cans on, properly
Mhm.
like studio cans, which really made me feel isolated. I couldn't even talk to the people with me, and not that you're supposed to
Mhm.
talk during the opera. But the second half, I have hearing aid. I'm losing hearing in my right ear, so I have my hearing aids in them, and I went to the people and they said, "Oh, well, you can have one that connects to your hearing aids." What an amazing! The quality was fantastic. Connected in through the induction loop system, and actually was a much better experience. So I think, and especially because we're also now beginning to blend the expensive world of, let's say, hearing aids with the consumer electronics world, and I just got hold of some AirPod Pro 2s with their hearing aid ability in them. They're not as good as the hearing aids I've got, but they're a pretty good proxy. And so I think it does make it democratizes it. It takes away from clunky technology. The irony is that obviously my background in telecoms, my assumption had been that we would look at a 5G private network or very high quality Wi-Fi in the theater. But of course the theaters don't really want to fork out for doing that. This is a much cheaper, much more elegant solution that could easily be delivered. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you. So one of the other things which I wanted to ask for your perspective on, you mentioned about AI and data and regulation and so on. In the world of audio description, and I like you, I love going to theatre and enjoying live performances. In that world where a human interjects their bit of description, their clever language in between the dialogue, do you see a role for AI automating that? Is that something you've come across? Are we going to
Uh,
have a whole new world of audio description?
yeah.
And is AI going to do the captioning automatically as well?
Well, answer the second half first. AI captioning is now pervasive. We got used to it during the pandemic, like, of course, on telecom calls like Zoom. And it's pervasive now in that kind of communication. Many television networks in the United States are switching to fully automated captions. And I can tell because I got an eye for that. I can tell when it's human and when it's not. And
Hmm.
humans make mistakes too, but so do the bots.
Yeah.
Um, and it's right now, it's fully embedded. I tell you, I was at Yahoo. I had asked for it and got a very nice fat budget for captioning all the videos on Yahoo. I understand now a significant portion on now are AI captioning. So that's a done deal. And interestingly, in the early days of automatic speech recognition, I didn't think it would ever take over. Well, it has. So I was proven wrong. In description, okay, here we go again. I don't think it's ready. I do believe it's possible for both broadcast media and streaming as well as live, but I still think there's a lot of work to be done, both in terms of recognizing context, what's a key visual element in a scene, and then talk about live. That's really a challenge. But even in pre-recorded, um, and fitting it in between the pauses in dialogue,
Yeah.
I believe it could be done. Does anyone want to put the massive resources necessary to make it happen and be done right? I know companies are working on it, and I know companies that have been involved in captioning and description are absolutely even rolling out preliminary versions of AI description and, of course, speech synthesized narration. Not there yet. If you want to make a prediction, I don't know. 2 to 5 years, you'll see some
Yeah.
rudimentary. It's not really that close yet.
But the possibilities there, and these things are moving very quickly.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
do love the idea of choosing the voice that you want to have it described in. You know,
Hmm.
because one of the interesting things going to so much theatre in London is the people doing the description. Some voices are great to tune into, some are quite difficult. So if you and especially if you've got a hearing impairment where you want to shift it up the scale a bit to a bit more treble, a bit more or whatever. So
Yeah.
I do think by the way, I'm my concern is that the art of audio describing and people who do it really well, it is a joy to listen to, because they minimalize the amount of involvement in it. But yeah,
Yeah.
so I think that side of the technology, there's plenty of communication stuff around. There's plenty of AI power around. I think one of the problems we face in things like live theatre is when do you interject the narrative, the audio description narrative. Some people said to me, "Oh, well, why don't we use the lighting to do that?" I go, well, why do you not just do it off the voice? Because the voices like to be a little bit more random because the actors, like you say,
Mhm.
do make mistakes. But so yeah, I think there's a few triggers in there. So there's a
Mhm.
marriage of perhaps the Auracast and what's going on the production side, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah,
Can I
no,
take?
let
Oh,
me just get back to that question of the voicing. I was spoiled at WGBH, which developed what we call descriptive video service. The describer, that is the writer, had a set of talents that an English major, a great writer would have those skills. We then hired professional voiceover narrators to do the voicing. The describer would never do the narration. We knew it was a separate art, a separate
Hmm.
skill. You can't necessarily scale that. And of course, a lot of people who do the writing now also do the voicing. But a great voiceover artist is to be respected for the way they can deliver with emotion the right content in the right context for adults, for children, for mysteries. So um, I think the synthesized voices will help that because they're getting better and better. But I love a good voiceover artist.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm with you on that. Can I take you back at one point Yahoo was owned by Verizon, if I'm not mistaken. Was there anything in the telco world that made you think differently? So you've been in the, like you say, in the public broadcasting world, public sector. You've been in the internet world of Yahoo, and then you're partly in the Verizon world. Is there anything in telco which makes you think telco will adopt and embrace all of this, or was the experience different when you were inside that sort of camp?
Boy, talk about worlds colliding. So I got to Yahoo. Real still the feel was early internet, Silicon Valley. Take risks, say yes to anything, try it out. Um, obviously other companies began to dominate the field of the internet, but Yahoo had a great team of people who really cared. They wanted to try things, take risks. But due to the economies and everything else, when Verizon bought Yahoo, it was, oh, this is interesting. An interesting coming together of two very different cultures. You look at Verizon from the early roots and all the telephone companies they started from, it was well over 100 years.
Hmm.
Heavily regulated, one of the most regulated industries there is, and therefore cautious, and therefore also 150,000 employees when they bought Yahoo. Yahoo was at 10,000.
Hmm.
Everything was different about that, but the opportunity to make great changes that will have vast effects when we were at Verizon was pretty exciting. But things had to move slowly. They
Mm.
were not risk takers. And I understood that. I didn't really push back. I knew that was the environment we were in. I think the telecom world, like Verizon, is doing what they need to do. It might be kind of the minimum. And unfortunately, and I'm going to be seeing a bunch of my old friends at Verizon again and shortly to get a sense of, are you pushing the boundaries? Are you trying any new technology out as opposed to talking about it more or just making sure people know about it better internally? 5G was going to deliver all kinds of amazing benefits. From the minute Verizon bought Yahoo, it was nothing but 5G day and night.
Hmm.
And it's kind of interesting to look back and it's like, so, okay, a little
What's
faster,
changed?
low. Yeah,
What's
what's
changed?
changed? Okay, a little lower latency, sure.
Huh.
But it was going to change the world. You want to see what changes the world? Take a look at AI or
Yeah.
even, immersive reality. But telecom, I think, could. Verizon bought Yahoo because they wanted to be part of the new cutting edge internet world. But they sold it 3 years later to say, you know what? I don't know that this
Mm.
marriage is working.
Didn't fit in, did it? And I think that was the issue that, and in fact, one thing that gives me great hope, and you mentioned about the smartphones being used as the device to get us into, inclusive, accessible content, rather than the system that a theater or someone else might provide. And I think the power of those devices, I often say, the camera is a proxy for my eyes on that, and smart glasses will give me even more freedom to use cameras to access stuff, and obviously the microphone in terms of the hearing side. I mean, of course, the actual smartphone in terms of a brain, isn't it? It's doing so many things on our behalf. So in some ways, the telco isn't in control of enough of the pieces because as you said, the content's coming from streaming, it's coming from social media, and the consumption is on the device, which is outside of the control of the telco. So I think their value chain has been broken. They tried to create an
Hmm.
extended value chain ecosystem, And frankly, everyone else went, "No, mate, you're joining our ecosystem. We're not joining yours." So I think that that dynamic is very interesting. And as long as they keep building very good networks and we get good connection everywhere we need it, I think that's fine. You mentioned AI and you mentioned regulation. Can you just get your thoughts on that? We've got the European Accessibility Act kicking in June, I think it is, in a couple of months' time. You mentioned some legislation that drove captioning in the US in your earlier days. Is regulation fit for purpose generally, and then comment on AI as well, because AI I think is a bit of a different
Yeah,
beast.
regulation is a blunt instrument. It is rarely well tuned and surgical. And I guess that's the way it has to be. So, like when captioning was required in the US first, it was required that all TV sets have built-in closed caption decoders. Nothing about the programming, just make sure people could watch it.
Mm,
Okay, that was good. That was um, the same year as the ADA, 1990, but it didn't grow captioning tremendously. So 1996, the Telecom Act in the US said, oh, by the way, everything has to be captioned now. Oh,
mm,
okay, that changed everything. And industry said, well, can't we just do like voluntary efforts, cooperation? And that used to be one of our favorite oxymorons. Voluntary cooperation? Are you kidding me? You'll never do it.
mm,
So that really worked. It really, really worked. And then 10 years later, the blind community said, we need to start requiring description too. And industry really fought back against that. So where captioning was at 100%, description was at 3%. And then the streamers were taking over the world, and they said, really, you can't require that for us. We're just dealing with captioning. We're just starting up. How about voluntary cooperation? And we
mm.
laughed again. And lo and behold, the streamers are now doing so much description voluntarily. And wow, look what they did. Okay, some of them were sued, yes. Um, but there is a tremendous amount of description that didn't require hard and fast regulation. So I'm surprised and shocked. I still think the regs are essential. A kick
Mhm.
in the butt is needed. And then, okay, maybe some voluntary efforts will make it even better.
And do you think is the same true for AI, or AI to me, and obviously we've discussed how you might use it to interpret text, to render it in different languages, different whatever. But AI is just going to affect every aspect of the telecom, the broadcasting, the media, the social industries.
Yeah.
And I
There's
think
no question AI needs to be regulated, but at this point, it is so amorphous in so many different ways. The idea of writing a reg, boy, um, I'm not always on the side of the deregulatory efforts by the industry, but you have to be some genius to figure out how you actually write a reg that supports accessibility and the quality necessary to deliver useful AI. Yeah, I'm all for it. Maybe I need to
Mm.
use one of the AI tools to write the
Exactly.
legislation.
Well, so there's the European AI Act,
Uh,
which is very. I haven't read through it. I'm not a lawyer. I probably would drive me mad reading through it, but I've certainly looked at summaries of it, and there's all sorts of things in there about risk and obviously privacy, confident ethics, and the like. But it seems in the way that a lot of European legislation is very prescriptive, and being prescriptive on, as you say, something very amorphous is dangerous because we don't know how it's going to be used. I personally would like to see something saying the piece of content you're watching was created purely by an AI engine, or it was created by a human. Perhaps the exception will be in the future, this is created by humans, So almost a badge of honor not to being created by AI.
yeah,
And there are other people looking at more broadly based frameworks for AI to try and encourage innovation rather than to stifle it, which I think is one of the concerns, certainly in some of
yeah.
the bigger
Yeah,
political
I
movements.
I think as a bare minimum, yeah, you should identify if it's been created by a bot. Yeah, that's a bare minimum.
Mm,
Other aspects of it remain to be seen. Wouldn't it be great if the people who are rapidly rolling out new versions of all kinds of software actually just cared that their technology was good. And by good, I mean a good user experience, accurate, and also accessible. Wouldn't
For
it be great if
everybody.
they just
Yeah.
designed it that way?
Yeah.
Wishful thinking. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, regs will have to be written that basically say, it's obvious, but please don't hurt anyone with your AI. And
Yeah.
please don't leave anyone out in the cold. Yeah,
But it's interesting because to sort of summarize what you've been saying is that the technology obviously was designed around different disabilities, whether it's captioning or audio description. But actually, the ability to deliver that now pretty quickly and often automated really means that the cost has been taken out of that significantly, and it rounds out the offering to everybody. And that is that notion of inclusive design. And I would love to see something which says, yeah, the way services get developed, software gets developed, but actually we think of all the ways in which it might be used. And AI will help render it in the different formats usable, whether it's, I'm not a Braille user, but there are Braille users still around. After 200 years, there are still Braille users around. And so being able to deliver it in a format suitable for the customer. And I think that's been part of the problem in the telecom industry, in the way that the customer experience is developed. It's been dictatorial. Said you will receive a paper bill, you will now go digital. Whereas actually the reality is many people still like to be called by human beings. So Mrs. Lewis, your bill's this much this month. He's going to. I know that's probably stretching it a bit far, but I'm encouraged by the way technology is adaptable and flexible, that it will be able to render the service in the way people would like to have it. And I
I
mean,
believe it's all possible to do that. I think you could have a chat bot instead of customer service that actually answers your questions, but I've never actually seen one do it that well.
yeah,
I have no doubt they could. I wish they would, before releasing or firing all of their human customer service reps. It's like, would you like to test this and make it a little better,
yeah,
please? Because it's not really about inclusion or accessibility. It's just about good. Is your tool any good at all? Uh, and I always say, this is my mantra, good design is accessible design.
yep.
Accessible design is good design. And if you care about good at all, that's part of it.
Well, Larry, I didn't doubt for a second that we would end up with it covering a lot of ground, but
Mm.
really appreciate keep up the great work over there, and obviously keep us informed, especially around those startups and things. That's always those little innovations coming in from startups we've seen quite a bit of sign language rendition, which is starting to kick in. I don't know how good that is yet, but I'm confident it will get
Oh,
good.
I'm all over that too.
Oh,
So
good,
that'll
yeah.
be
Yeah.
chapter two.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to many more chapters to come. Larry, thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us on Inclusively. Please do sign up for the podcast, and we will keep you informed as we too expand our journey and bring more and more perspectives into the world of accessibility and inclusion. Larry, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. Take care.